near you.
Hey everybody, how we doing tonight? Welcome. Another episode, Paranormal Encrypted Rabbit Holes. Crystal J, I see you out there. Gary Spikes, welcome, buddy. Glad to see you up and about. Amy, how you doing, Amy? Melinda Williams, Psychic Medium, is joining us tonight. How's it going? Val, good to see you there, buddy. Karma's in the house. Crystal J, feeling like a sponge today. Glad to see everybody here. Melinda, I saw Tammy Johnson up there in the chat earlier. Irene is with us. Good to see everybody here tonight. We got a good audience tonight. Miss Nada Decker, welcome. All right, guys. Hope everybody's had a fantastic week. Last week, we had a request for us to talk about Roanoke and the disappearing colony and what happened. Little Twisted, hey, how you doing? And this is something that I've seen a lot of podcasts on and never did a whole lot of research into it because to me it just seems kind of, well done. Irene Akiko sharing from Tokyo, Japan. Well, hello there, Tokyo, Japan. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. You see the documentaries and it's kind of a really well played mystery. A lot of people know about it, but I did see a podcast a while back and then there was some really interesting things. So we had the special request, so we're going to talk about it tonight. And I decided to take a little route. I kind of went high tech on it. If you guys know me, I'm not very high tech. But I decided to try this Alexa thing and ask Alexa what she knew about the Lost Colony of Roanoke. And the response I got was pretty fun. So I'm going to do that live here with you guys, and we're going to see what Alexa has to say about Roanoke. So if you guys are ready, we'll go ahead and get this set up here. And I believe you have to start off with, hey, Alexa, right? Is that how we do it? Hey, Alexa. So, hey, Alexa, tell me about the Lost Colony of Roanoke.
Well, Justin, we have the Lost Colony of Roanoke. English settlers traveled from England to settle in North Carolina in 1587. How are you doing tonight,
fantastic.
Justin?
I'm doing pretty good, Miss Alexa. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here. Excited.
I'm so excited to have you on, guys. This is Miss Alexa. She has a podcast of her own. Are you still doing the podcast? Are you still active with it?
No, we're not active with it anymore, unfortunately. It was a duo thing with my sister, and she moved away, so...
Mm-hmm. Oh, it was fantastic, though. But I met Trace. I call her Trace. I know that's not her name, but I call her Trace. I worked with her when I was working over at Starbucks, and when she found out that I had a podcast, she was like, oh, I've got one too. You have got to check it out. And so I did. I went and checked it out, and I got to say, I was very impressed with the research that you did and what you guys pulled together. So when somebody said, hey, I want to know about Roanoke, I had to reach out to you guys immediately. And because I've never heard of more thorough research on the subject than what you guys put together.
Well, I appreciate it. I mean, Roanoke has been a big question mark for me ever since I was a kid. I remember going through textbooks in school and they had a tiny little chapter on it for the Lost Colony of Roanoke, and it just sparked me, and ever since then I have any tiny pieces I could pick up, I just sucked it all in.
And what I find, it's really interesting because it depends on who you talk to is what angle you get. Like, that's the thing is people are like, nah, it's pretty mundane. They just up and move somewhere or all these different things. But when you really look into the whole history of it, there's a lot to it that's not reported in the story. There's the colony was there longer than what people knew about. It was actually done was a couple different times. They tried to set it up and couldn't make it go. Like, there's a whole thing to it. So why don't you bring us through it? Tell us what the legend of Roanoke is, and then we'll go there and tell us what you found in your research.
Absolutely. So the basic legend that you're going to find if you look anywhere is that you've got anywhere from 115 to 117 people that traveled from England over to North Carolina, just right on the bay right there to Roanoke Island. And they got there in late July of 1587. And when they got there, you're talking about middle-class English people that didn't have any survival skills. They were brought there to start a colony and start having families and didn't know how to survive. So upon getting there in July, they had not enough provisions to last till the winter. They didn't have anything to really survive. And so they sent John White, who was the spearhead, if you will, of bringing all these colonists here. And they sent him back to England to get provisions. And when he went back, he got caught up in the war with Spain. And Queen Elizabeth just said, nope, no one's leaving. Everyone's got to stay here. And it wasn't until 3 years later in 1590 that he finally had the option to he got some merchant to go back there with him with supplies. And when he went back, he couldn't find anything. That's the base of the story we know, and we know that when they did go up there, he found everything was abandoned. Everything was just left there. Some of the houses were taken down, and they were able to find that Crow was written into one tree and Croatoan was written into another tree, and that led him to believe that the colonists had moved, because that was a predetermined thing he had with them, that they were to leave a sign or write something if they needed to leave in case of emergency. And so those two were found, and he believed they went down to what is now known as Hatteras Island, which was the Croatoan tribe down there. He tried to go down there. He wasn't able to because of a storm, and ended up going back to England and never was able to go back. He went back to England and died just a few short years later. And that's kind of where the mystery evolves. We don't know what happened to them. These 115 to 117 colonists, we have no record of what ultimately happened to them. They disappeared.
Susan F. says that she was recently in Cape Hatteras, and there are people there saying that the colony did actually go there on the outer banks of North Carolina. So the people there are claiming, yeah, they actually got here and, showed up. Is there any evidence of that, or what is the evidences of them being actually where they were supposed to go?
So there's been some archaeological digs that have been done down in Hatteras Island of the older Native American burial sites, or some of their trash sites along the side of where they knew these villages to be. And they found some evidence of the Elizabethan objects that would have been around that time frame. So that's late 16th century time frame. They have those items that have been found with the right time. So they do believe the colonists could have gone there. My issue with that is that they knew they had contact with them. They knew they traded with them. So what's to say those weren't there's no evidence that they actually lived there. They're just little things here and there, a button here, a belt buckle here, just these tiny little items. There's nothing concrete about that.
Okay. Yeah, so just things that would show there was contact within the cultures, but nothing concrete saying that the whole colony actually just upped and moved there. And you're right. I think if that was the case, there would be more evidence other than just a few bits and baubles, definitely. So let's talk about the colony itself. Like what's the history of the colony? What was set up with it? Because a lot of people don't understand that the colony itself was kind of troubled from the start.
Absolutely.
This wasn't a thriving village or a thriving fort. This place was already suffering, and a lot of people don't know that. So what have you found out about that part of it?
So this is where I absolutely went crazy. I could not believe that this was not just part of the story of the Lost Colony of Roanoke. You have the fort very first being established by a handful of army men. First and foremost, this fort that the colonists went to was already there. It was already established. However, we have some issues, and that's where that comes in. Those first men that were there and built the fort from the get-go did not get along with the local native tribes. They had some issues with them. And in my research, what I found was that they basically abandoned the island. They saw some ships go by and they jumped right off that island and left. Now, when we have Mr. Sir Riley came by, he was in charge of trying to start a colony there. He comes by to check on these handful of men and realizes that they're all gone. And he goes, "We can't just leave this fort to go the wayside, to just completely fall apart. I'm going to leave, I think it was 15 men. I'm going to leave 15 men here. Might have been 3 men. I might be getting my numbers mixed up, but he leaves some men there to kind of oversee and make sure it's held and to send colonists back. And when that larger colony of 115, 117 people come back, all those men are gone. So we don't know.
Oh wow, okay.
We have 3 times they try to settle here. We had the first handful of army men, and they were like, "Oh, they're not family men. They don't really care, just." So they brushed that off. They were having issues with the local tribes, and then we have the additional men that were left there to kind of hold down the fort, if you will, that just disappeared. I mean, it would make sense if they died of disease, if they had some issues with the local tribes for some evidence to be found, but there was nothing found of them. They were just gone with no evidence, no writing, nothing. And then you have the colonists come in.
The reality is there's been more than one disappearance with Roanoke. The first group they knew about, they bailed. But the second group, and those were soldiers, you said, right? Trained military men.
Yep.
And there was no trace of them either at all. Nothing. Absolutely vanished.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah. See, nobody talks about that.
It's a really interesting fact that you have multiple cases of people disappearing in this site. And it'd be one thing if it was conflicts with a local tribe or one of my big theories was this is Hurricane Alley. You have storms nonstop, so it would make sense that during hurricane season, things might get wiped out and they might get in trouble and things. But there was no reports showed severe damage to this fort when new people came to try to recolonize it. There were no reports of severe hurricane damage, so I can't imagine that would be the cause either, a natural disaster type situation.
Right. Now, and sorry, I'm putting all my thoughts together here with it. I know how they described the fort was found after the colonists went missing. Is there any description of how the fort was found when the colonists got there?
The only reports that I found was that things were neglected, overgrown.
Okay.
But that's pretty much all that was stated, which is interesting because, as we know, John White is he headed this and he is an artist, if you will. He's very particular about these things. So it is interesting that there wasn't a bigger description of it, but all we know is that it was neglected.
Okay. Got a couple questions for you here. A Little Twisted was asking, didn't they find a ruined stone with engravings on it that had to do with that?
They did. So we're talking about Eleanor Dare. Eleanor Dare is Eleanor White Dare. This is John White's daughter. She had gone with the big colony and actually had given birth to a daughter only, I think, a month after they got there. They had real skin in the game to make sure that this stayed alive, this was a good colony, that this worked. It was her tablet that they had found. This tablet, keep in mind, was found and turned in the 1930s, I believe it was. Nowhere, just off the street. walked in and said, I found this. How much do you want for it? And they paid him $1,000 for it. This tablet back then could not be tested very well. They had varnished it. They had waxed it. They had done a bunch of stuff to try to preserve the stone, which now has led to issues with trying to carbon date and trying to validate that this is a real stone. Now,
Right.
this is one of 40 that were found. All the other stones were proven fraudulent. This is the only one they cannot prove or disprove. So when it comes to the stones and the slates, I mean, it's really up to you. Most scientists are 50-50 on it, so.
Okay. All right, well, we know what the legend is, and now we got kind of the run-up to what happened with it. What did you find in your research? Like give us the dig in, the lowdown. Let's go down that rabbit hole. Who were these people? What happened? Where did they go? What are the different theories of where they went? Because
Absolutely.
I know there's multiple theories out there, and some have really good, I think, logical standing to them,
Mm-hmm.
and some I think are just completely far-fetched.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go through it and let's go down that rabbit hole and let's find out what it is that you came up with in your research.
Sure, absolutely. So one of the notable things for me when I was digging through this, I'm not sure how to say his name. I believe it's
Mm-hmm.
Mentau. I could have it wrong. He was a chief son of the local Croatoan tribe. He
Okay.
went to England with Sir Riley, back to England, came back with all the colonists. He was an established tribe and was, I believe, knighted by the Queen Elizabeth. He had a very good working relationship with these colonists. So it is a big theory that they did assimilate with these tribes. He established such a good relationship with them, but here's something that isn't widely known is that these islands were already in contact with English privateers, which were pirates that were ordained by the Queen to steal from Spanish ships. Pirates have already been in these islands. They've already caused trouble. So you're looking at one man, the son of a chief, who's trying to build relations and trying to build contacts when other tribal members could have issues with these white people coming in and causing all this mayhem right off their shores and coming in and expecting help and things like that. But I do want to preface that the Native American side of things, a lot of the archaeologists are trying to set things straight so that we know the real story, and we want to believe that it was an easy assimilation with that tribe, and that's the biggest theory. That's what a lot of people talk about, is having that assimilation with them. They, I believe, about 50 years later, had someone go down there and found Native American with blue eyes and talked about their white ancestors that could read from books. So there is this verbal history that they could have been assimilated, but it doesn't necessarily mean it is those colonists. So that's one theory. Another theory that we have is John White was a great cartographer, like we talked about before. He was an artist. Absolutely amazing. I mean, look at that work. That's incredible for 1500s. And he did this.
Yep.
This is some of the most accurate cartography they had at the time. And just incredible. You can see Croatoan highlighted in red up there. And if you look inland, what's really interesting, if you go down that canal and right at that split where it goes into those two rivers, there's this little white patch. Now, in cartography, you could not erase things. You just patched over if you made a mistake. But he rarely made mistakes, but he has this little fort. This symbol, this four-pointed star, is the symbol of a fort. And he drew that on there way inland. And to think he did that, such a big marking as a mistake, people wonder if he knew that they were going to go inland and that was going to be a spot for them to go. And that is a theory that they did go to this spot. I believe it's about 50 miles inland, where they would have built another fort. but he covered over it, and no one, and mind you, we only found this out, I think 10, 15 years ago, this little spot on this map. So that's another theory. A lot of my information is basic. I did a little bit more digging than everybody else, I think, did just on the surface. They see one story and they kind of, they're like, oh, we get it.
Yeah.
But I just kind of delved into this. But those were the main theories.
Okay. I just want to approach one thing. This idea of, light-skinned, blue-eyed Native Americans. What's fascinating is that is actually common report from stories from all over North America back in that time frame. There's Mississippian tribes from the Mississippi Valley that supposedly reported having individuals with fair skin and blue eyes, and they used it as evidence of like Welsh colonization and prehistory times and all this kind of stuff. So I think it's fascinating that we get that same report out of that area, and they're tying it into those colonists. So I wonder if it really is tied in that way, or if it's just kind of a genetic anomaly that just kind of happened within the tribes in North America at the time, because again, we hear it from multiple tribes. And of course, the Europeans are going to say, oh, well, they look like us, therefore there must be some kind of history with us there. But now that we study genetics more and more, we know that kind of stuff can happen. It can have these throw-offs in there. So I wonder, do you happen to know if anybody's done any genetic testing with different areas to see if they could find some way to trace it to the colony, or is that not even like a viable thing?
I haven't heard of any reports directly. I did some deep driving trying to find some genetic testing that somebody did to try to figure this out. But no one's done that in our generation, at least. And, a big issue with digging up these sites and trying to find these colonists, because we still haven't found any bodies. But the theory with assimilation with these tribes is that when they are digging up to try to find artifacts, if they do come into contact with any kind of human remains, they have to immediately stop. There are federal and state laws against, digging up burial sites. So they've got to be really careful. And if they test Native American, sites shut down, no more digging, nothing at all, that's fine. Like, that's okay with me. Like, we all know why. That's
absolutely.
But if they did a testing and they found colonist bones to be there, or if they found earlier or later generations and they could do the testing on those, because they can do the testing on those bones to find out genealogy and, how they were. But we just haven't gotten there yet, unfortunately.
Okay. Rebecca had a question earlier, and I was trying to find a good way to segue to it, but I'm just going to bring it out. Rebecca asked, if the message said Crow, could that have been in reference to Crow Indians? Earlier when you had talked about the carved into the tree, but it wasn't Crow like that, right?
Correct. It was Crow, CRO. But also, I also had the same question, Rebecca. It's a great question. I was wondering that myself. So the Crow tribe is not from that area. The bigger tribe from that area is the Algonquin tribe. So Crow would have been Crow, and then Croatoan, somebody wrote it out fully. So it kind of was seen as a mishap, if you will.
Right. The way I always took it was kind of like, if the job is to leave a message, I would have that job given to multiple people to carve a message into multiple trees. That way it couldn't be missed. So I kind of see it as one person was doing it on one tree and one person was doing it on the other tree. And one got finished and one didn't. That's kind of always been my take on it. What are some of the other theories that people have thrown out there of what could possibly have happened to these people? And do they link it to the disappearance of the first group of people?
Yeah, so I actually had to write down some of these because there was a long list. And like you said, some of these get pretty far-fetched. but let me tell you what I found and what I've got, because there's
Sure.
quite a few of them. I'm just going to go over them briefly, and as you want to go back over them, we certainly can.
Sure.
So the first one, of course, is assimilation. The second one that is most popular is that the entire the entire colony went cannibalistic, which is interesting. They were massacred by local tribes. They all died off from disease. They theorized Spanish troops came by and killed all of them. A lot of people think there was political sabotage. They didn't want this colony to work out, and so I don't know how that would have worked, but that was one theory thrown out there.
Okay.
They tried to sail back. I mean, we've got they were all killed because they were witches. We've got zombie apocalypse. We've got alien abduction, turned into trees, the reptilian devil of the forest.
Wow, that's
Possessed all of
specific.
them. Mm-hmm. Yep, they get to be a lot. I mean, some theorize they all just walked out into the water collectively. And I actually don't have an issue with a lot of these theories. It's just a lack of evidence that
Right.
spurs the questions.
Well, there is a huge, I don't want to say evidence, but it's a huge aspect that we haven't talked about yet, that I think kind of undercuts most of these theories. And that is simply the condition that the fort was found when they found all the colonies were missing. To me, this is a linchpin that we can use to discount pretty much most of those theories, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if they went cannibalistic, there'd be certain things that would be found. Obviously, evidence of that. Archaeologists look for mostly split bones where the marrow's been taken out of. That's one of their huge indicators. If they had been attacked by another tribe, all these other things had happened, there would have been evidence of warfare and destruction. If they all died from disease, there would have been evidences of this. But let's talk about the condition the fort was found and why that kind of undercuts all that stuff.
Absolutely. So in my research, this is what threw me for a loop. When John White got back to the colony, he found that things were left as they were. So you have kitchen items left out on tables. You have plows still in the field. You have shovels just left where they are. These everyday items that seem to be in use when you are using them and dropped. And in that case, that comes into question. What happened if not a sudden onslaught of something?
Mm-hmm.
There were no arrows. There was no evidence of them being attacked whatsoever, whether it be by Native Americans or by Spanish coming by. There was nothing that suggested that. And the only other item I can think of that would make them rush out suddenly would be a natural disaster. But again, the fort showed no evidence of having massive structural damage. Nothing severe happened. I mean, you still had the trees that had crow and Croatoan, which is the other part of it. If they did leave in such a rush, if they did leave in such a hurry, how did they have the time to write out Croatoan? It makes sense that someone went to one tree and was only able to write CRO and couldn't finish the rest because they had to get out. Mm-hmm. And then you have this other tree that has it completely written out. And it make it make sense. The puzzle pieces are not fitting together. What happened to these people? And there's no one left.
Exactly.
There's no one. There are no bodies. No one left.
And you're right. So, I mean, given the fact that it's an immediate thing, I mean, I can feel the sense of urgency. I mean, you're sitting there and you're cooking food and you're leaving, you're gone. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like you're out in the field and all of a sudden you're literally dropping your tools to make your escape. And for me, that belies that doesn't fit the point where they just abandoned the village and assimilated with another tribe. There has to be a causation in there. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like, hey, this is too hard, we need to leave, because they would have packed provisions, they would have packed tools, they would have packed things that they thought they needed. You know what I mean? So yes, they could have assimilated with the other tribe, but that doesn't tell us why they left in the first place. But also, like you said, there's no indication of violence. There's no weaponry found. There's no like burned scorches, like somebody was trying to burn down buildings. Absolutely nothing. And to me, that's where the biggest key of the mystery is they just didn't decide to pack up and leave. They literally left, or disappeared, or were taken, or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, just right off the bat, they immediately disappeared. Rebecca, she wanted to know, she was interested, what was that reptilian forest theory based on? Where'd that come from? Is that just kind of a random out of the blue, or is there Indian lore about some kind of reptilian creature?
As far as I understand, I'm not too sure if it is related to Native American lore. From what I could piece together, it seems like it was pieced together later on by people who maybe didn't know about alligators or hadn't experienced them before, and went to that area and experienced maybe some crocodiles or alligators, and with the religious aspect at the time, immediately attribute it to a reptilian demon that lives in the forest.
Makes sense.
But that's just my personal theory. There could be more into it, but that's what I pieced together.
I mean, that does kind of make sense. So it was just kind of one of those very vague, like, just kind of throwing out there things. All right, I got a standing stones, buddy. You always come in late and ask all the questions from the beginning. So we're talking about the Lost Colony of Roanoke. Croatoan Island, we said, was actually now called Hatteras, right?
Correct.
The Cape Hatteras, the Hatteras area, and we're talking 115 people in the colony. That's the estimated number. 115 people disappeared, plus the party of soldiers before that completely disappeared. Right. So I just got to catch Standing Stones. He's one of our regular guys, and sometimes he doesn't catch the show right on time because he's busy. So sometimes we got to recap for him. It's all cool. We're good, Standing Stones. There you go, buddy. So one of the theories that I found interesting, and it ties back into the artifacts you were talking about earlier, isn't it claimed that they found a boulder or something that had an engraving into it that was tied to the colonies, like further south, where maybe they did evacuate and they were on a different trail instead of going to Croatoa or Hatteras, and then so they carved something. I'm trying to remember what it is, and my mind's blanking on me, but it had the initials of that Miss Dare, the one you were talking about earlier. Is that a thing, or am I just completely imagining that?
No, I saw that pop up in my original research, and I think I had brushed it off a bit because, as far as I know, that stone, they didn't have a way to really carbon date that signature or what was said on it. And as we know, there's been so many people that have been attracted to this story and have wanted their 5 minutes of fame and made forgeries of things. And for me, if there's no hard evidence, I'm kind of on the fence about it, and I'm not sure what to believe. And it honestly, if you look at the location of where Roanoke Island is and trying to travel inland, you have to ask the question, how did they get from Roanoke Island to get inland? They had to sail across this lake, and I don't know if they even had the equipment to do that. I just don't John White
Okay.
took their only ship. I don't know if they were able to do it, so I'm not sure.
So that kind of just brings up more questions than it answers with that possibility. Okay, that makes sense. Logistically, it's just not something that sounds like it would work.
I mean, there might be other theories, and I'm not an official archaeologist.
No,
I'm not
that's
an
all right.
official historian, so this is just based off
I
of what
don't
I've
trust them
found.
anyway. So
Yeah, there's definitely some theories that have been thrown out that they just don't sit well with me. So
right.
that's one of them.
So what do you think is the most likely scenario of what happened to the colony?
So my theory is that the colony itself, I believe, was under a lot of stress of not having the provisions they needed. I think that
Hmm.
may have caused a rupture within the colony, and I do believe that some of them may have gone to Croatoan, Hatteras Island, and assimilated with them. That's definitely a possibility that part of them did. I don't think all of them went, though. I think a good portion of them, including Virginia Dare, Eleanor Dare, wanted to stay there, wait for John White, her father, to come back and hold down the fort like they were told to do. And I couldn't tell you what happened to make them leave. I just find it very suspicious that no bodies have ever been found. We know that
Yeah.
they can't find them on the island, so where they went from there, your guess is as good as mine. But I love the supernatural theories. They're probably my favorite. I mean, if you're thinking about the late 1500s and you're a group of 50 people and you have a swarm of alligators run up to the beach and you just run off away from them, and like that sounds like a great story to me, and that's kind of what I like to gravitate
Right.
towards.
Right. So you got everybody, cooking and in the field, and you got the kids out playing by the beach. And all of a sudden, a bunch of crocodiles show up at the beach, and everybody runs out and looks. And it freaks them out so much, they just decide to go right from the beach and head over to the other island. And they assign one or two people or one person to go back to carve it into the tree. And I think he's carving the one tree, but I think the wood is too hard. And so he stops and goes to a softer wood tree. Like first he's carving in a maple, and that's just too dang hard. So then he goes to a pine tree, which is softwood, and then he, skedaddles too. There's so many things you could throw in there, right? Like just what the
Well,
heck
and
happened?
I when I was looking at the maps, I was refreshing all of my information today. When I was looking at the maps, right inland of where Roanoke is the wildlife preserve for alligators.
Oh
Giant,
wow.
giant wildlife preserve. And I'm thinking, you know, I don't know if you've done much research into alligators and crocodiles. I'm terrified of them. So, of course, I have done tons of research on them, and they make bodies literally disappear.
Oh yeah.
There
Oh
is
yeah.
nothing left. So that's just probably one of my favorite theories, because to me, it's like, well, we haven't found anybody. So
Yeah.
what's the one animal out there that's going to do that? That'd be
I mean
it.
that's true. And again, that's the kicker. The two biggest things I think that make this such a mystery is the abandoning the village in the middle of daily activity,
Mhm.
and no type of other evidence has ever been found anywhere
Mhm.
that would indicate where they could have gone. I think those are the biggest ones. The biggest ones. Yeah, Lulu Bell, talking about stories of the Blue-eyed natives. We covered that. That is the possibility. With the assimilation thing. Now, I don't. Did you come across the tie with Edgar Allan Poe
I
to the
I
colony?
yes, yes, and I have a couple of them too. It's
This
surprisingly
blows
not
my
just
mind.
Edgar.
No,
Yeah.
it's not, and that's the thing. This is what really kicks it into high gears. The mystery for me. I have talked to a lot of people, and they know nothing about this angle. They've never heard of it.
Really?
And yes, it brings us into the realm of huge conspiracies
Mm.
and really just kind of crazy stuff, but it's true. As far as I know, it's true. I mean, Edgar Allan Poe, I mean, granted he's not a contemporary, but he's not that long ago. and his life has been completely scrutinized and analyzed. You know what I mean? And yet there's a tie to this disappearing colony. So give us a lowdown on that. Tell the audience what that crazy tie-in is with Edgar Allan Poe.
It just feels like with this story, the more you hear, the crazier it gets, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Edgar Allan Poe, now sorry, I've got a friend that wanted to say hi.
Hello.
Got to get him out of the way. Sorry, bud. So Edgar Allan Poe was passed in 1849. So this is what, 100 or 300 years later, 250. On his deathbed, Edgar Allan Poe was said to have whispered the word Croatoan. Now, this in and of itself isn't really that crazy. The thing is, Edgar Allan Poe, when he was on his deathbed, it was after he had disappeared. He was supposed to be on a trip, I think, to Pennsylvania, got lost, went missing, was found in Maryland, confused, dazed, didn't know anything, was completely a mess, where he was taken to get care and later died, whispering Croatoan as his last word on his deathbed. So that's just wild. He has no connection, as far as we know, with this. And back in the 1800s, this wasn't a huge hit story that was everywhere. You know, it passed around here and there. It's the Lost Colony, but it's not as big as we see it now, where most people have heard it, or it wasn't spread around by American Horror Story, where someone's heard it somewhere. So for him to have said this on his deathbed, it's a Native American word, and most people you ask from that Native American tribe don't know what the origin of that word means either. So for him to say it off the cuff like that on his deathbed, and we don't even know what it means.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say about it.
I mean, granted, he was eccentric, but you're uttering your last words. You know, I mean, if anybody knows they're dying, it's Edgar Allan Poe, right? I mean, he's kind of the master of the macabre. For him to pick that word instead of anything else. But there's more to it than that, isn't there? There's more to that word. This is what really blew. And I haven't never been able to verify if this is urban legend, if this is myth, or if this is real. But it seems weird that somebody would build a myth off of this. You know what I mean? Amy WC, it's Croatoan. It's the word that was carved into the tree. Edgar Allan Poe whispered on his deathbed. So what else is crazy with the Croatoan thing? What else is going on there?
So not only do we have Edgar Allan Poe, we also have another famous horror genre author that wrote this before he disappeared, Ambrose Bierce. And I believe this was 1913 that he wrote this and disappeared. We've got this one. I think this one freaks people out a little bit too. Is Amelia Earhart writing this in her journal before she disappeared. That's and again, like you said, none of these we don't have solid confirmation of this happening, right? But we do.
Right.
This is just a weird thing to circulate for all these people. And we also have it written down in a log from a ghost ship that sank in 1921, I believe. So we have this word circulating around so many disappearances. And at this point, you've got to wonder, like, is this word cursed? What is going on? Why is
it?
Why is this just popping up over and over again? And it's over years and years of it happening. But I tried to look up more information on the word Croatoan, and I just couldn't find where it originated from, what's going on. The only leading thread is its connection to Roanoke, and then these people either dying or disappearing right after this word pops up around them. So,
well, they all technically had disappearance, right? Because Edgar
Mhm.
Allan Poe disappeared for a while
Yep.
before he was found. Amelia
Mhm.
Earhart disappeared.
Yep.
I didn't know about Ambrose Pierce. If you guys don't know who Ambrose Pierce is, oh my gosh, look him up. He is one of the greatest. I don't even know if horror is the right word, but just kind of horror genre,
Mhm.
mysterious, creepy, the stuff that we're into on this YouTube channel, definitely. So check out Ambrose Pierce. I love his work. But yeah, I think it's absolutely fascinating how, I mean, could it just be these people are uh, joking and going, oh, well, I'm going to write Croatoan, but then like coincidentally disappear? I don't think so.
Well,
Um,
we I saw another one in my most recent research of a. I think he was in prison for robbing. He was stealing stuff, and this was his last word before he was released and disappeared.
right. So,
And
it,
I'm like, what? That kind of leads the joke. Like, is it? And but that was in the early 1900s as well. And if it was a
right.
joke, how many people really know about this back in the late
Yeah.
1800s, early 1900s?
Not social media days, right? They're not
Mhm.
having TikTok challenge going on here.
Mhm.
Um, and so to me, I mean, because one of the things I look into is a lot of the urban legends in the cryptid world and paranormal world. It sounds like the making of urban legend, and it sounds a lot of people are hearing stories of people that disappeared and then going, "Hey, did you know that they said Croatoan before they disappeared?" Or it
Mhm.
really sounds like that.
Yep.
But it would be interesting to see if we can't pull any hard evidence. I mean, if it's supposedly in Amelia Earhart's diary, we should be able to have that,
Mhm.
right? I
Yep.
mean, we should. That makes sense to me. Um, Edgar Allan Poe, I don't know if we could find if there's any hard evidence with that. Same with Ambrose Pierce, but Amelia Earhart, if it's in her diary, somebody should have that. If somebody's saying, "Hey, it was in her diary,"
Yep.
um, so that'd be some very interesting aspect to look into. Um, saw some more questions here. Rebecca, here's a good one. She said maybe it's a password for opening a portal.
You
I mean,
know,
hey,
I'm
one guess
open
is as
to
good as
any
another one. You know,
suggestions.
Penny Van. Oh, she said, "Could we make this show a marathon and discuss this all night?" That'd be fun. But I'm not sure I'm up to that tonight. Uh, and I'd have to prove that with the boss, I think, first. I know he says I can do whatever I want, but that might be a little much. Um, that's funny though. It's funny because talking about the literature and all this kind of stuff. Have you ever read Phantoms by Dean Koontz?
No.
Are you familiar with that one? Okay. So I won't give the plot away or anything, but he ties the story into the disappearance of Roanoke. And he also kind of tries to link it with the disappearance of the major cultures like the Aztecs and the Mayans and everything like that, where other cultures around the world have completely disappeared. And granted, it's a fictional book, and he's an amazing author, but it did make me think, like, is there some connection? Because there's been other towns, other civilizations, other cultures that have completely vanished without a trace in similar circumstances.
Mhm.
So it does kind of bring that question. If we're going to look at the big picture and not just, hyper focus on the one town, if we look at the big picture, I might do a show on that. Just other towns and cultures that have simply up and vanished besides Roanoke. It makes you wonder if there isn't some sort of connection there as well. Maybe it's not as simple and mundane as they just decided to leave and join another tribe and kind of assimilate. I don't
Mhm.
know. It makes you wonder.
Yeah, I mean, you see cultures and towns all around the world. I mean, this isn't like a one-off crazy thing. This is definitely in a series of disappearances that have happened of large groups of people that just
Right.
we don't have any answers for. And this might be my own little world here, but I
Hey, it's a
just
rabbit
find it
hole. Let's do it.
it is, but I do find it really interesting that you have Roanoke Island that is just sandwiched between the Bermuda Triangle with disappearances galore
Hmm.
and the Appalachian Mountains, which again,
Oh,
disappearances and mysteries like crazy, and it's sandwiched right in between these hot spots, and it just
sure.
I just look at it and I go, that's that's a scary place to be. I don't know if I'd want to be there.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense. It's just I can't say it makes sense because obviously none of it makes sense, right? But
Hmm.
it does make you wonder: is this one of those things that happens that we just can't explain at all? And we're not going to. We have to try because that's our human condition kind of forces us to try and explain mysteries.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
I don't know.
I do want to say in a lot of the research I did, the biggest find that we're really trying to center in on is the truth of what happened to these people. I mean, if you're talking to archaeologists or anything like that, and people who are
Hmm.
on the ground studying, they have so many issues in the local communities with people just saying that there was a massacre or something
Sure.
like that. And I want to say that we're while we like to speculate, we like to
Yeah.
have fun with this. I mean, there has been no evidence that, I mean, you or I have talked about that there was any kind of conflict between
Right.
a real severe conflict or death or massacre between these colonists and local tribes.
Right. Penny Van, we talked about this, but because you're asking, we'll go ahead and discuss it again real quick. She said, I also wondered if they slowly die off from illness or weather or lack of provisions, and then they put the body in the water as one of the reasons why, we don't see them. But the problem is, Penny, and is the fact that when the people came back and found this colony abandoned, it was abandoned in the middle of their daily activities. There was still food out, there were still tools and stuff out in the field. Like somebody, like they were literally out there working and doing their daily lives, dropped what they were doing and disappeared. And so there's no indication of anything like that, of a slow decline, because there would be evidences of that. Nowadays they can track down to like which house was the last one lived in and all this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So that is one of the popular ideas, but I firmly don't believe the evidence um, bears that out in any way, shape, or form.
Mm.
I have heard the theory that another tribe had showed up and basically kidnapped everybody, but with no violence, just under the threat of violence, which makes sense. I mean, that's a feasible scenario. Let's say a bunch of the kids were out picking berries and stuff, because that's an average chore that the kids would be able to do to help,
Mhm.
with the colony. And maybe the tribe, took them hostage, and under threat of killing the kids, everybody else went quietly. To me, that's a possible scenario. I don't want to say likely, but possible. And that kind of fits the evidence, but there's no evidence for that particular theory other than how can we explain everything was left behind. It's a theory just like all the other ones with no actual
Mhm.
evidence to back it up. It's a
Well, and
theory to try and fit the pieces instead of the pieces building a theory. And that's the
exactly.
wrong way to look at it.
And one of my issues with kind of this type of theory is, if something like this were to happen, the I don't imagine the Native American tribes, when the colonists either were killed off or died off or whatever the case would have been,
Hmm.
that the bodies would have gone in with their loved ones in their burial grounds.
Sure.
And so when it comes to unearthing these areas and we still just haven't found anything, I would imagine it would be separate. You would have Native American burial ground, and then they put the colonists wherever. They didn't really care. That would be what I
Right.
would imagine. So you think
Right.
we'd
Or
have
vice
found.
versa, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Given the mentality of the colony people, they probably would want their own separate burial places and practices anyway, right? Because most of the colonizers, and correct me if I'm wrong, they were of a religious bent, right? Usually they're all of one specific religious persuasion, and I believe that's the case with these ones as well.
Hmm.
They probably wouldn't want to be mixed in and interred with people that they considered heathens or savages, or whatever was their terminology would be. You know what I mean? Does that sound right? Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, their cultural and religious differences would definitely have been big enough that they would have wanted to follow their own religious rites and
Hmm.
how they had traditionally done things. Absolutely, makes complete sense.
So here's a question I just thought of. Was there any indication from when the colony was found abandoned? Could they backtrack to see when it had abandoned? Could they tell, like, oh man, they left like a week ago or they left like a month ago? Was there any indication of that at all?
No, no, they. I think John White had assumed it had only been abandoned for like a few months. But
Okay.
there's been no scientific discovery of any sort. I think
Okay.
I think John White assumed that it'd been pretty recent.
Okay. And I would think if you were observant, you could tell, hey, this food is partially rotted, or this food is like completely ashes. You know what I mean? Like, you would think that, and I'm sure that's probably where he kind of, because as we said, John White was no slouch. He was a pretty smart, guy.
Hmm.
And so if he's assuming it's a few months, I'm sure he had his reasoning for that.
Well, and he has his daughter and his granddaughter that would only be 2 years old there. I mean,
Sure.
he's got some reason to try to figure it out. But
Yeah. And that's one of the things where, because he tried to find them, but the weather was bad, so he left.
hmm
I mean, is that a good summation of it? And that
so,
surprises me.
yeah, I don't remember what exactly the source was. I saw that he had tried to go down to Hatteras one time and
Hmm.
got caught in a storm, and then he tried to go down another time and got caught in a
Okay.
storm. So it could have been one or two times. I'm not 100% sure. But what we do know is that the merchant ship in one of the storms, they lost an anchor, and the captain was like, "Nope, we are going back. We don't care if they're 50 miles right there. We are heading back."
Right.
And
Right.
that was that. He didn't really have much of a choice short of jumping ship. So
Sure. Okay. Well, I just know if that was me in that scenario, I mean, it'd have been hell or high water to keep me away, and apparently it was hell and high water keeping him away from trying to find his family. So
yeah.
that makes a little more sense if it was that bad, because I know I if my daughter, and I don't have any grandkids that I know of yet. Um, but if I did, yeah, I mean, and if I was out trying to find him, nothing would keep me from trying to find him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, but that makes a little more sense that he tried more than once and
Mhm.
was thwarted, and he was probably getting a little bit on in age and expensive to carry out those kind of endeavors, because it wasn't just, hey, I'm going to hop in the car and go drive around town. It was, I'm going to travel across the country and
Yeah.
the ocean to a different continent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
3 month trip is on a
yeah,
boat. That's
yeah,
not.
exactly. Any other questions, guys? And any other theories you want to throw at us? Any other ideas? I'm going to scroll back through and see if we have any more comments or questions about it that I missed. Let me see. A lot of good conversation, guys. I'm loving it. Standing Stone says, I keep getting that Heaven's Gate cult thing when I think of them disappearing. Yeah. Some kind of, a supernatural thing going on there. Any other things, guys? I'm not seeing a whole lot.
I,
Anything
I,
else you wanted to make sure you brought out, Alexa,
well, I think
about this case, or anything that the audience can kind of look into as well on their own if
yes.
they wanted to dig something up?
So I think the kind of revitalization of this whole story was with American Horror Story and
Okay.
their whole take on a season called, My Roanoke Nightmare or whatever it was. Um, kind of pushed this, but there is kind of daunting theory that these colonists are kind of cursed and haunting the woods around and in North Carolina, which my supernatural curiosities, my sensitivities, and all my bells and whistles kind of go off with that. And hearing that those colonists are kind of lost wandering around. So,
Sure.
you know, if anybody gets any more information or anything pops up and they hear more about the other side of things, because we've kind of approached the more evidence side of things, what we can know now, what we can know, and just all of this basic stuff. But, you know, you have the other side of it where you have the paranormal experience and things like that. And it'd be interesting to see if anything like that pops up with people in that area.
Well, you know, I'll throw this out to the audience, and those of you that watch Grizzly's other shows, where sometimes they're doing, you know, remote viewing and readings and stuff, throw this question out there, guys. Ask them what happened to the colony of Roanoke. I don't get to watch a lot of his other shows just because of my schedule and stuff. But some of you guys that are out there that watch your shows, if they're asking for requests for readings, bring that up and let's see what Grizzly and the other people can come up with that. I think that'd be an interesting. I don't think I've ever heard of anybody doing a reading on the Roanoke scenario, so that'd be kind of a fun experiment to go with.
Hey, that sounds like
guys,
a whole nother rabbit hole.
Right? Well, that's a rabbit hole I don't go down personally, but you know, we've got some other shows and they do go down that rabbit hole, so they like checking it out. Hey, I'm getting lots of comments, Alexa. Everybody loved you. Thank you so much for coming on. I know it was kind of last minute, but it was kind of a brainstorm I had going over Roanoke. I'm like, you know what? I know somebody that knows this way better than I will, and just researching it for a week. So thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Everybody out there, thank you so much for listening. Everybody that's going to listen in the future, appreciate you guys. Keep checking us out. As Grizzly would say, something about a coast to coast and around the world. Everybody have a fantastic night. We love you guys. We'll catch you on the flip side.
Thanks for having me.
Peace.
Bye.
I'm going to do my favorite little outro here, guys. Stay tuned for the bloopers.
It's a grizzly.
Should we get out of here?
No. We're gonna watch and listen.
Action.
It's a grizzly.
Oh, shit, should we run?
No.
Action.
It's a grizzly.
Oh, should we run?
Okay. It's a grizzly.
Are you sure it's not a chipmunk? Action. Get out of here! Action.
It's a grizzly.
I'm out of here!
Huh. Maybe it is a chipmunk. It's a grizzly.
Are we gonna die?
I don't know. We're just gonna sit here and listen and watch.
Let's get out of here, maybe.
Fall!